Hello and welcome to another episode of Coffee Break Blogging. Now, that word blogging is in the title of the podcast, and there's a lot of stereotypes that go along with that word, blogging. The chief among them is the fact that we are creating a literal poop ton of content. Yes, that is a technical term, poop ton. I could have said it the other way, but I chose not to. This is a family-friendly show. But we create a lot of content right now. You probably, especially if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you probably realize that I have a sort of non-traditional, non-stereotypical way of approaching blogging. I'm the first to tell you that we should not focus too much on creating content. Kind of odd, but that is really the game that needs to be played if you want to turn this into an online business. And that is essentially what we are talking about here. We want to turn blogging into a business, but the truth of the matter is that blogging in and of itself is not a business. It does not make you money. In order to actually generate revenue doing this, we have to have a real business for which the blog, promotes it. That's how it works. Okay. And so for that reason, we need to not spend so much time creating a poop ton of content. Gosh, I don't know why I said that word twice, but I have, and I hope you get the idea. Okay. Lots and lots and lots of content. Now, the stereotype of a blogger is that we're essentially always writing our next blog post. We're always creating our next video. We're always recording our next podcast. And as soon as we've hit the publish button on one post, we're thinking about the next one. And so there's this assembly line of content, and that is what bloggers are quote unquote supposed to be doing, right? Here's the thing. If you're doing this, if you come into, I want to use blogging to make money, and you see that word blogging, and you think, okay, I got to create a lot of content. Okay. And so that's what you do. You think, I need to build my audience so that I can monetize it and do all these really cool things that David talks about. And so you think that you need to go and start creating content every darn day or many times per week. Some sites actually go out there and try to post multiple times per day. More power to them. Whatever, that's their bag. Definitely not the way I like to do it. And so if you're doing it this way, you are probably going to find yourself flying by the seat of your pants when it comes to your content. You're going to always feel that pressure of the calendar, that pressure of thinking that Google is sitting there watching you, thinking, okay, are you going to post that next content? And so you're constantly trying to post new stuff, create new stuff, stay on top of everything so that you can post new stuff about it, create multiple forms of content, and you're constantly battling the calendar. How many times have you come up on, a new week on your calendar and you think to yourself, oh, I feel bad because I've not posted to my blog in too long? Is that the way you want to be feeling? Are we creating our own slave driver with our own blog? Are you flying by the seat of your pants, essentially meaning that you've got no plan? You're just basically just pumping crap into your blog because of the calendar, because of the clock, but you don't really have any real rhyme or reason to it. Are you dancing all over the place when it comes to your topics because you're doing it by the calendar? Now, here's the truth of the matter is that if you're doing it that way, you're doing it the way a lot of bloggers are doing it. A lot of bloggers end up repairing this problem, quote unquote, by just posting stop posting, I guess. That's not the way to do it. I'm not saying that content is unvaluable. You do need to be posting it. You just need to do it in a strategic way. Now, when you're flying by the seat of your pants, when you have no plan, there's a lot of extra mental payload associated with doing that. You feel that ongoing pressure all the time of what your next blog post is going to be about, when you're going to get it done, when you're going to publish it, of all the activities that go after that thing has been published. There's always that mental pressure sitting on top of you like a rain cloud, And that is exactly how blogging can feel like. No wonder that many people think that that blogging is a poor way to make money on the internet. No wonder a lot of business owners out there have heard all about blogging, but make the decision for themselves that it's not the right fit for them. It's because they think that they've got to do this, create so much content, and it's just a lot of work. Okay. So let's give you a different way of thinking about it. The podcast episode title here is why you should plan your content well in advance. And that's exactly what you should be doing. Here's the truth of the matter. When you pre-plan your content, it removes a lot of that mental payload. It removes a lot of the guesswork from this whole thing. That whole pressure that you feel with what am I going to write about? Well, you've already determined that. You sat down and you pre-planned your calendar and you know exactly what you're going to write about. So at that point, it's all about just execution. You can plan it accordingly, okay? It drastically speeds up the production of content for your blog because half the battle of creating content is thinking it up to begin with, thinking up the topics. But if you get that out of the way, if you get all the decision making out of the way, then it's just a matter of banging it out. That part is generally easier. Okay. And if you still don't find that part easy, just do more of it. You'll get better at it. Trust me. But it drastically speeds up the production of the content that you need to fuel your marketing when you have it pre-planned. It also allows you to batch things together. And this is a really big one for me. Batching basically means that you do similar types of tasks together in one time period. So for example, the very morning that I am recording this very podcast that you're listening to me right now, I am actually recording 4 of these episodes back to back. Now I'm recording a ton of them in advance here because as you're listening to this show, I'm actually going to be out of town, probably sort of close to getting back home actually, but I'm not going to be ready to produce my next episode yet. So this was recorded well in advance, but I'm doing it by batching it. And I can bang out 4 episodes of this podcast so much quicker if I record them, at the same time. Rather than me, this is a Wednesday to Saturday podcast. Wednesday and Saturday is when these episodes come out. If I came like Tuesday and I said, oh crap, I don't have my episode done for tomorrow, that would put a lot of undue pressure on me. It's same thing for Saturday. If I arrived on Thursday or Friday and says, man, I really got to get that episode done for Saturday, this podcast would seem like an awful lot of work to me. I probably would not be keeping up with it. Okay. The fact that I can be as regular as I am about it is because I batch it together. Now, I also pre-plan it, and I'm going to mention that here in a bit. But batching is important. If you can get into that writer's mode and bang out 3 or 4 blog posts all in one sitting, you're probably going to have better quality blog posts because you kind of get into that rhythm while you're doing it. But that means that you're putting those blog posts into the queue, onto the calendar, and you don't have to worry about writing content for some time, okay? I do this all the time with the written portion of the Blog Marketing Academy. I will create content for 3 or 4 weeks in advance. And sure, it takes some time. I'll actually have a day dedicated just to creating content. Typically for me, that's a Monday. And I'll sit down and I will just do nothing but bang out content for the blog. And that can be podcast episodes, that can be written blog posts. If I have any videos to do, I'll record them. And that's stuff that I will do in one sitting, or one work day. And I'm putting things on the calendar out there for later. I could never do that if I didn't sit down and plan the content, know what I'm going to be talking about. Okay? That's very important. It also allows you to prep content that serves your marketing goals. That's a hugie. This is supposed to be content marketing, not just blogging for the sake of itself. We're doing it so that we can grow our business. Now, your content is going to grow your business a lot more effectively if the free content jives, if it goes in conjunction with the stuff that you're doing for money. because then your free stuff is promoting your paid stuff. Makes perfect sense. So if you're looking down the calendar and you know that in 3 or 4 weeks you're going to be doing some kind of a promotional campaign for one of your products or what have you, plan some content to go out around that same time that promotes it. Okay, but you can't do that if you're not looking ahead. If you're only looking one level ahead all the time, it's really hard to grow the business. Really hard to have your content do what it's supposed to do, which is grow our business. Okay, so those are 4 really big reasons for having pre-planned content. It removes the guesswork, it speeds up production, it allows you to batch things together, and it allows you to create content that actually serves your marketing goals. Now, an example of that I'll bring up, and I might have mentioned it in the past, is this very podcast, Coffee Break Blogging. Now, I've talked about before how when I first started podcasting, it really was quite irregular. It didn't really have an ongoing pattern to it. And it was because I went into it without a plan. Now, when I relaunched it as Coffee Break Blogging, I went into it with a plan. And it was shortly thereafter that I actually went out in my RV, because my family and we have an RV and I sometimes will use it for business purposes. I took off by myself, no wife and kids, which was great, nice and quiet, different type of environment. So it allows me to really focus on planning type stuff rather than feeling like I need to get something done. And I planned out the entire Coffee Break Blogging podcast through the end of 2015. And at the time, we were talking about close to 100 episodes that I pre-planned. Okay? And as it sits right now, I am now recording episode 105. Well, I can tell you right now that I pretty much know what I'm going to be doing all the way through episode 146. Now, that removes a lot of mental payload associated with delivering this podcast. A lot. It makes it so much easier. When I need to produce a podcast episode, I simply look at the next one in my lineup here. I go, okay, well, that's what I'm going to be talking about. I'll then bang out a few bullet points. I don't typically plan all the content of each episode in advance. It's more of the topics. So I'll bang out a few bullet points there, and then I hit the record button and go for it. And that is the typical production of this podcast. This episode was planned months ago. As far as I knew that I was going to be talking about planning your content in advance. Now, before I hit the record button, I put a few bullet points together to kind of give me something to keep me on target while I'm talking about it. And then I hit the record button, and here we are together. So that's kind of how that works. So it's a really prime example of the benefits of planning out your content in advance. It's worked really well for me on my podcast. I do it with my written content as well, not to the same degree. I'm not pre-planned out through the end of the year when it comes to the blog, but I do stay a few weeks ahead typically. And so it really does help, and I'd highly recommend that you give it a whirl. Now, one thing that I would recommend that you do here, because it really does help with your mindset as you're doing this, is to go somewhere different, some unique environment when you're actually planning out your content. Don't do it at your main computer if you can do it this way, because what happens is you end up getting distracted by social networks, or you feel compelled to do something else. And what I would rather you do is just take off your worker bee hat and really just put on your executive hat and be looking at this from the big picture and plan out your content. If you can go to a coffee shop and do it, that'd be great. If you happen to have an RV like I do, that's awesome. Nothing like doing that around a campfire. Okay. All right. Now, you can do the same thing that I just talked about for your written, for your videos, for your emails to your email list, even your social media updates. All this stuff can be planned out in advance, and it's a matter of how far you want to take it. When it comes to social media, you're probably not going to plan that thing out multi-month in advance because it's a lot more of an instantaneous platform. But you can certainly plan out the next week. And like maybe on Monday, you set up your social media stuff for that week and then just forget about it. There's certainly things that you can do if you pre-plan this stuff, okay? Now, your primary tool for doing this is what's called an editorial calendar. And you probably have heard this be talked about before. I've also talked about it at the blogmarketingacademy.com. But I'm going to talk about it with you guys, my CBB listeners, on the next episode of this show. We're actually going to talk more in depth about the editorial calendar and how to produce one. Okay, so that'll be in the next episode of Coffee Break Blogging, episode 106. Okay, now, related note to this, I want to tell you a little bit about a course that I've created called the Content Marketing Clinic. And this course is only available right now to Blog Monetization Lab members. Now, the reason I bring this up is because what we're planning here with our editorial calendar is our content. And we want that content to be as effective as possible. And there's certain components that go into creating content that's going to have real legs. It's actually going to serve our marketing purposes. And it's all of that stuff that I talk about inside the Content Marketing Clinic. It's a full course on how to create very compelling and effective content that actually converts. Now, and some of the stuff that we are going to be talking about in there is stuff like the editorial calendar. It's going to be included in there as well. But there's a lot more nitty gritty on how to actually create these various forms of content and how to make content that actually moves our audience to action. And we need to have that stuff in place so that we can properly plan it. And so that's the Content Marketing Clinic. It's a course that's right now only available inside the Blog Monetization Lab at blogmonetizationlab.com. Lastly, I'd like to remind you and request, of course, that you run over into iTunes at blogmarketingacademy.com/iTunes and post a review and star rating of this show. If you're finding it valuable, if you've been following along with me for a while and you still have not posted a review, please take a minute and make this happen. It doesn't take very long, okay? It really would help me out quite a bit. So go over to blogmarketingacademy.com/iTunes and let's get this done right now, okay? So with that being said, I'll see you in episode 106 where we're going to talk about the editorial calendar. See you then.